Welcome to the Fancy Comma YouTube. Today I'm joined by Fanuel Muindi. Did I say your name right, Fanuel?
You did, yeah.
You're the founder and director of the Civic Science Media Lab located in the Sai Resident Collective, which also founded by Fanuel. The MLab work focuses on conducting investigative civic science journalism to interrogate and unravel ongoing progress, and shed light on important issues across the field. With support from several foundations, the lab has hosted numerous interns and fellows over the years who have contributed to the publication of several articles, dashboards, books, and reports. In addition to launching several new civic science entrepreneurial ventures, the lab's current flagship project is the broadcast network called the saiTV network. A neuroscientist by training, Dr. Muindi nowadays describes himself as a civic science scholar, journalist, and entrepreneur. He received his Ph.D. from Stanford University and completed postdoctoral studies in MIT's Department of Brain and Cognitive Sciences, which is where I did my undergrad. Shout out to Course 9. His current appointments include being the Lasker Research America for Civic Science and Professor of the Practice in the Department of Communication Studies at Northeastern University, so an actual SciComm professor in addition to running SAITV. Welcome, Fanuel. So what I really wanted to ask you about, you run SAITV, which talks about SciComm. It's like a SciComm news channel. You're a neuroscientist turned SciCommer. You're a much higher level of neuroscientist than me because I never got my PhD. I never did my postdoc. What precipitated your career move to SciComm from neuroscience research?
So my transition, or I would say migration, if you will, really was driven by questions. I was really fixated and fascinated by looking at the interaction between science and society. And so when the opportunity came around to look at that more directly, I jumped on the wagon. And so what really forced me or allowed me to move across were the questions, to answer your question specifically. So I'd spent about 10 years on the bench, asked some really great questions looking at neuromechanisms, in the brain, driving state transitions in organisms. And so that was fun. But now I was looking at a different set of connections in between science and society. And so that's what really drew me to start the organization and then also to doing the civic science journalism that I now do.
Civic science journalism is a thing that SAI is like really advocating. You wrote an article, a Medium article about it. We'll link it in the description box. What is civic science journalism, and how did you get involved in this?
There is no formal definition at this point. I think if you talk to different people, they'll describe it differently. But the way I think about it, it's really about what it brings together. So it brings together civic journalism and science journalism to try and showcase, examine, and then participate at that juncture between science and society. So strengthening those connections. Ultimately, it's about action. And that's what, when you think about civic science just by itself, it's about action. It uses fields or brings together fields such as science communication, public engagement with science, science policy, all these areas that ultimately just force the question, what is that action for the community, right? For whom? For the community. So civic science journalism takes a stab at trying to understand that landscape, right? To articulate and examine. And I think the examining part is the critical aspect of civic science journalism, where you're asking these hard questions of both the practitioners, people who are doing the work, and those that are being impacted by the work.
It comes from civic science, which is like science to improve humanity, and then also so it combines civic science and journalism, right?
Yeah, it is a subset from that, but ultimately civic science is very large, right? There's multiple things that are happening inside. And so there, as I mentioned before, I am not the first one to sort of do this. There have been others who have tried to do this. What we're trying to do is formalize it and really bring together like a platform that exclusively looks at it. That's, I think, what our unique contribution is, and then our approach is doing this through a broadcasting like network, kind of like what Bloomberg does for financial news. We're trying to do that for civic science.
Tell us about SAI. I love SAI. It's like my go-to for SciComm news. You're a SciComm professor.
Yeah,
So
so
tell us about that.
let me break that down. So the lab is located in my nonprofit, the Sai Resident Collective. The Civic Science Media Lab is located within the collective. That is an independent venture completely, and I've been running that for several years. And so just for people to understand, so in our collective, we have what we call residents. So I am one of the residents, one of 25. And residents either come in as scholars, which I'm on the scholar track, or entrepreneurs who are running ventures, right? Various SciComm or other types of informal STEM initiatives around the world. So they're treated like faculty, these residents that then run these initiatives. So I then have my own lab within that framework. And so I am running the Civic Science Media Lab for quite some time. This past year, we did do a rebranding and relabeled ourselves as the Civic Science Media Lab. And so that is separate to my part-time professor of the practice role at Northeastern, where I just recently started there and teaching, where we'll be teaching kind of things related to civic science entrepreneurship, more focused on civic science entrepreneurship. And so hopefully that articulates the divide and the separation. The two are connected, of course, but yeah, the lab is only in the collective. That kind of builds everything from that.
Well, I look forward to seeing what comes out of your research lab. I love SAI because it's basically the only place I can get information about SciComm that's like happening, and also has a very global perspective on SciComm. Like you interviewed, I think you did like Black and Marine Science, and then you did something that was actually a Spanish speaking SciComm, and I think that's really important to have like a global perspective on SciComm. So, are there ways for people that are watching this to contribute to SAI Collective? Like, can they? What are you working on? How can people get involved in what you're working on? If there is anything that they can do, or
Yeah, so we are actively growing the network, right? So the way saiTV is structured, it's a project within the Civic Science Media Lab. And our working sort of framework is we want to provide sort of timely access to information within civic science as it's happening. And so the network idea is built around no one person can cover the landscape. It's too much, and things are happening in different scales and at speed. And so I have a show, for example, Questions of the Day within the saiTV network. And there are additional two hosts. So one of them you just mentioned, Jake, who does shows like every Mondays. He's kind of breakdown of some notable things that are there. Victoria Gonzalez, for example, she does more changemaker. So hers are more produced in terms of kind of storytelling and documentary style around key stakeholders and their stories. And mine is more at large, where we kind of go deep in some aspects, talk to various people about things that are happening, things that have been published, new organizations, whatever have you, right? And so for people to get involved, I mean, first, of course, if you are getting into the space, sign up and subscribe and just stay tuned for things that are upcoming. And if you have a story that you think will be very interesting for us to pursue within civic science, do let us know. We would love to hear from you as well. And so yeah, lots of ways to get involved, I guess. So.